Hello and welcome. We will start in about 2 minutes. So if you're watching the replay, forward. If you're here now, I'm glad. Just say hello in the chat so we can check if that chat is working. So I'm pretty excited. This is summer vacation time, and it's quite interesting that all of you guys have already joined too early. So thanks for joining. Hope it will be interesting and you will hear something cool. Hey, Vinod Siliani. Oh, Rajesh. Thanks for joining. Hi, Carsten. Good afternoon. Glad you could join. Yeah, we have a minute, I guess, before we can get started on testing. And I don't know, is this the first time you're seeing me? Would be interesting to know. Seeing some of my presentations going on. Cool. So yes, it seems like we're starting pretty soon. Next week I'm going on vacation, so that's going to be fun. We did a lot of changes to make it easier to onboard and understand the tool and try it out. So hopefully you'll see some of those things today. And then, it's going to be interesting. Reset timer. Yeah, I hope I could put a time on so you can see when we're going to start, but I guess it is around now. So yes, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining so early. Just hi Kishore and Ryan. Glad you could make it. Do say hi in the chat. I do appreciate it. I'm here in Denmark. It is summer, and that also means it is raining from time to time, which is obviously a little bit of fun. But we are inside and talking about automated regression testing for SAP Cloud Integration. I hope that is what you signed up for and wanted to learn a little more about how we can do. And I have a lot of demos that I will be covering and going through, which will always be interesting. So that's going to be fun. Ask questions along the way, either in the chat function that I can see you already found out, or put them into the Q&A, and then we will cover those as we go along or towards the end. So if there's something more, then just put it into the Q&A section. So we want to talk a little about why you want to test, some of the standard ways of testing, how to automate your testing, and how the FIGAF tool can help you. And I guess that's also a question to you. Is PI to CPI migration something you're looking at? Then just add that into the chat also, because then we will cover more or less on that topic or not. So yes. Hey Dave, Gilmore, Rustica, and yeah. And then we'll talk about how you can use this in your everyday testing, and then how to get started. Cool. Why do we test? Regression testing, it's about having a standard process to make sure that none of the changes that you make affect your integration. And let me give you an example of last time I did not perform regression test. This is something that has happened from time to time, and this is always on the most problematic times when it's not supposed to happen, but then it happens for one or another reason. And I was, I guess, probably last summer or fall, I was working on a project where we needed to add port of loading or discharge from a shipping document. And we needed to fetch that data in certain ways from some other content. Unfortunately, we had two data sources, and one of them added this new field and the other did not. So that meant that once we moved it into production, we found out that only about half of our messages worked. The other one failed. And it was the business person that found out that there was a problem and we needed to find a way to solve it. We probably spent like 20 hours to solve this issue, and a lot of work around problematic changes, etc. And probably it took like 5 business days. So I don't know if you have experienced something like this, and this is what I want for you not to experience by having to being able to set up proper testing for the things that can be tested. And obviously it's not everything, but hopefully some of these things can be improved over time. Why do we test? It's about avoiding to have problems in the code that you know exist. It's about covering unexpected cases that not all developers remember. So, and I think this example was really a good example. We just forgot that there was 2 systems involved in this, and I thought that the second system also provided that information, but that was not the case. If we had run regression testing, we would probably have seen, okay, some of the tests that we're running from specific system does not have this data. We need to find a way to do it. And then the thing we were also missing, once we're doing all of this bug resolution, we also needed to move a lot of things into production to make sure it works. And if we had better regression testing there, then obviously that would also have been better. But yeah, there's 2 types of tests that you need to know. There's the assertion or the unit test where you feed in some payload and then you expect a result in the outcome at the end. And yeah, it can be everything from expecting a full document or to expect a certain XML element exists once you have sent this in. This is something that requires that you upfront invest a lot of time in creating these test cases to make sure that these assertions is always valid. It is something that you do a lot in development, software development, because you can set up all of these mock services element and just feed in some content, check that you're getting the correct result, and then handle the processes from there. The other one is record replay. This is where you would say, here is a live set of data, and I want to take all of this data, and then I want to send the input message in and get the output based on this response. And this is the way we think is the best way, because some of the things that you have with integration, and especially if it's not something that you've built from scratch, is that you have certain criteria that exist if the company code is 4,000 or if some other scenario exists, that you do not really know all of the different scenarios that exist here. Obviously, the more you know, the better you can quantify these things, and that's an important thing. If we talk about some of the standard options that you're talking about, then I did a LinkedIn poll here yesterday when we were trying to prepare this, and I think, did we also have this? We have a poll also, right, Michael? About if we actually do test, and I think that's probably an important part. Do you actually perform testing in CPI? And I guess when I mean that, then it is about having it as a real process that makes it easy for everybody to provide this test and run these tests. So yeah, please just fill in. That's good. And I think one of the things I missed about this one is obviously when I'm working in CPI and creating a new iFlow, I would be using Postman because it is such a great tool to send in specific payloads to it. And in that development phase, Postman is really useful for me to set up and handle it. But if you want to do regression testing, sometimes it can be a little challenging, and we'll cover that a little later. And this is just what I wanted to say. Yes, there's difference in testing when you're developing, and there's difference in testing for regression testing. And that maybe I'll do something else on that topic. But yeah, thanks for answering this. So yes, a lot of you guys are doing testing. And I guess the question, if you put that into the chat, which type of testing do you actually do? Is it when you're developing, you're triggering the iFlow, or do you actually have a good process in place that runs for this? Yes, so obviously, I would like to have seen 50% use the FigAff tool for the testing, but obviously we are still growing in that area, and we could probably have sent it to some of our customers to get a higher response there. Never mind. And yeah, testing in CPI is often too complicated, so you need to find a way, and that's what we will cover here. And if we still talk a little about this Postman, I think, as I said, you can do some of these things where you would be building your iFlows, and then you'll be, checking these messages. But there's some requirements for this, and yeah, you can create all the assertions, test cases. You can share them with the team, so everybody would be able to trigger and process these assertions or these test cases for the different iFlows that you have. But there's some limits on this, and I would say it does require a lot of setup to ensure that they can always run. Then I know that, I don't know, maybe 50% of all CPI integrations start from an HTTP adapter, but then you also have other adapters. And if you want to be able to test those with a CPI flow, you would then need to add an HTTP channel also that would enable you to have two ways of triggering these things. And then how do you validate test data? And this is yeah. So obviously you'd set up your assertion saying, I expect this payload to be here, and I expect this content to exist here, that it has updated 33 records based on the data you have. It is quite time consuming to set up all of these things to do it. And obviously there's other places you have this. If you have a Groovy XSLT, you can set up unit tests that you can run as you get along, setting up and processing these things. That means that if you're making changes to a Groovy script, you can run these tests and see how it works. And yeah, using some of the Java Groovy Gradle frameworks makes this interesting. There is also the simulation of iFlows and mappings, and I think this has progressed quite a bit over the last year. Here, this is where in the CPI you will set as payload at a specific point in time, trigger it, and then you'll see what you're getting after 2 or 3 steps or 10 steps, whatever the limit is that this supports. It requires that you have a way to check if it is actually giving the correct result, because if you're just checking that it runs through, you may be missing if it switched your decimal from comma to colon, or yeah, or some of these other scenarios, rounding errors, etc. All of these things would be difficult spotting if you're just looking at a document, and especially if it becomes a larger document. You can, save the file for each run, and for larger payload, it really becomes a problem to see, did we miss line number 50 or not? Cool, good. So that's some of the different ways. I think they are all something you need to have as a part of the toolbox, but not the only one. So let's talk about how you can actually automate this. And as I said earlier, in FIGAF, we work with the record test cases from an iFlow, and then it should be as simple from a user perspective to create and run these test cases, configure the recordings, really simple. And this is what we want to cover. So let's take this. So let me go to my PI system. Oh, CPI system, I guess. So here we have a data object. We'll just enable the trace, and we will send in a message on it. Oh, that's not it. See your data store, yes. So right now I've sent a message on this interface, and we can see that it is 15. And here we can see we have the CPI helper. We added a plugin to this to make it easier for us to trigger and get a test case. So this is really useful if you have been working and you say, okay, this is really a good run. I can see that it covers all the different places that I want to test for this. And what you'll then do is you just click on the F logo, and you'll be taken to the site here. Call it webinar. So we will create it. It's just one message. We'll open the test case afterwards, and we will be using the web message expression here. And because we know which message ID it is pretty simple for us to create the recording. And then we'll just start pulling all of these messages down. And if we look here, we can see that it's taken a little while. It needs to fetch all the data, all payloads, all data that we have here. So now we can see it has 1 inbound message and 40 outbound. So let's look at these data. And what we can see here is we can see the payload, view, edit payload. We can see the data that's going on here. And if we we can see the persist steps. So if you have seen us earlier, you can see now we have added more data to it. I guess I forgot to set the record persist steps, etc. So those would also be saved as separate artifacts. Let me just do one step here, and in this one we can go in and make a small modification so we know that we have been here. So just replace the phone number here. This. So we have now recorded the test case we have taken from one of the runs that we have. And what we can do is we can create a test case based on this that will then enable us. So we take and say, okay, now this is what we want to use for a test case. We can run it on a system. So let's run it on this one. And what that will mean is we will take the original payload send it in to that IFlow. And if we look at the result here, we'll then be able to see what is going on. We can under here see that the message has been sent. And we can see we're getting some errors. That is all normal. We can see we are getting application ID. We can ignore that quite easily on these documents. So we will be going through an iteration about adding some of these different elements that exist, and the easiest is just to take here the top one and see, are there any headers, etc. we just need to ignore. So now we have ignored all payloads, and we can then do a comparison again. And the comparison here, we will look at all the payloads, compare the original with the expected payload, and then we'll see if there is any problems. So we can see a lot of success. Oh, there's one bad here. And if we look at this, we'll be able to see that we expect that the phone number was the webinar one. This was the one that we originally created when we're doing this. So we can see we can modify payloads, and obviously this is also one of the ways that you'll be able to deliver this, being able to modify the configuration as you move along and simplify some of these things, and going and say, okay, we have this, we also want to test other scenarios. So you can create subsets based on this, and once you're done with it, you just go in and create all of this and replace all of this. So next time we run it, we would expect that it gets the phone number when we are getting in here. So this is how easy it is to create a test case. We simply just take it from a test run. If we know that it is something that is being scheduled that we need to process, we can also fetch them in batch mode as we get along. So that's a little. Any questions on test case creation? Please ask it. So yeah, we do have a lot of configurations. We do, when we are recording this, we can specify if we want to collect the additional payloads, which is persistent messages, MPL attachments, all of these extra artifacts that in some cases will simplify your testing, because with the tool you will then also get these elements in. And you can also go and say, it's only important for me to see certain elements, or certain parts of the process is not relevant for me anymore. Good. So that's test case creation, that we quite easily can create test cases. And yeah, we could set it up overnight that it will fetch all messages from 10 different interfaces, create test cases for it, and then you just need to go through and figure out what messages exist, what are the attribute that we need to include into this. And we would be able to continuously monitor and update the test cases so they always make sense, they're always runnable without you having to do much work. And if we talk about the comparison, it's also pretty easy. You just send the messages through again, and the system will handle all of that. You can automate a lot of the running, comparison, schedule it to run every night, etc. And I think one of the key aspects that we probably should have added here is also the new thing that SAP added, that you can perform regression testing of your CPI systems, that you can go in on your CPI Cloud Integration Suite and say, my productive system and my test system should not be, or should be upgraded a week afterwards, because then you have a full week where you could run the test on your development system, see if they give the same result. If they do not, you know, you need to perform a lot of tests and update it before the next update cycle. And if you have these test cases, it is really simple to just run them as you get along. Yeah, and then there's special cases where you want to test something special, and as you saw, it's possible to go in and make modifications in the payload. So you would then trigger a new flow, and with that you would then be able to see how that is being performed on the system, and thereby figure out how you can actually work with these things. And then you will continuously check the result and improve the process. So there is some work involved for you as a user to determine what is important to look at and what is not important. Actually, I think this, where did that end? The other thing I wanted to talk about is this thing about mocking, about how if you have IFlow where you, for instance, is saying create employee or get order status, and you know that that order status or that employee can only be called once, and if you call the same data again, it'll just say, hey, this order is either not available or the employee is already created, so you cannot create it. And this really makes it difficult to test. Then you need to create 5 different simulations where you want to test all the different parts of the IFlow, and then we get back to a lot of maintenance work on setting up all of these things. I'd like to show you how easy this is to do in the FIGAF tool. And what it will do, it will create a copy of the original IFlow. It will replace external endpoints to point to FIGAF. It will trigger, link all of these different changes to the test case. Trigger message, fetch the data that needs to be at those specific point in time. It will then provide response to all the queries, and then it will fetch the payload after the comparison and perform the comparison. So let's try this with our IFlow we created here. So we do have multiple different levels of configuration. We can either do it on the full IFlow, or we can say, okay, we only want to do this for a specific test case. So depending on your scenario, depending on what you want to achieve, there are some different scenarios that would make sense for this. And all we need to do to mock endpoints is just to select mock. Do not use original receiver communication or mock endpoints. Press save, and now if we go back to our test case, we can see here we have our test case here and the testing run here. If we run it on our data store object here, it will start processing this test case, and then we can see here the result on what's going on. And we can see here it has created a new object called FIGAF mock get customer order details, and in this one we can see that it is using HTTP calls, and if you look at these, then they're calling the FIGAF system. And that means, and if I just show you the original one, here we have the OData call that is being performed and shown to the user, and they would be able to see what's going on here. But once we've done that, we can mimic all scenarios. Well, almost. There are some of the other external calls that removes all the headers payload. So we can modify and add headers and payloads. And that means that the response that we're getting from this we need to, the system would wait until the IFlows deployed, and then it will trigger the messages into it. So if we look here, we can see the status. It's not sent because the IFlow is not started yet. So give it a few minutes, and then we should see it in here that the IFlow is deployed. We can create copies of IFlows, and that also means if you have something that is triggered with an adapter we do not support, then the system would also just create a copy of that IFlow and put in the data that it needs there. So now we can see that this IFlow has been triggered. And if we look at the, we don't want to create a new FIGAF. Yeah, we cannot obviously create it, but if you look at the payload here, we can then see at the headers that we're getting, there's probably different, and where this data is coming from, etc. So this gives us, and we can see that we started on an endpoint that was created by the FIGAF tool. And we can see we get a lot of errors again. And this is, yeah, because there is some differences in the headers properties that we are not able to exchange. We are getting these type of errors that we just need to go through and ignore. We can put a catch all to ignore everything if we wanted to, but I guess that's, yeah, not really ideal if you want to see if some of them is actually working. And then we will process comparison again. There's still some errors. Maybe this is just because they have not been compared yet. And we can then look at the default. So some other headers we just need to ignore here. So this is how easy it is to create test cases even with mock. And when the original IFlow is then updated, this mock IFlow will also be updated, and you'll be able to run the data there. So that's process full comparison. So no more errors. Everything works out successfully at this point in time. Okay. Cool. Unit tests. We also talked about that for some cases we do have Groovy scripts that we want to make sure are successful and we can run, debug, etc. And what we have done there is, yeah, I wanted to make it as easy for developers as possible, because there's a lot of these logical things that you need to make sure that you have created correctly. So one of the things that we're doing, and this is obviously the full tool that has a lot of other capabilities that makes the life easier of integration developer, is that we have a Git repository where we have all packages, IFlow, script collection, mappings. All of these objects are being continuously synchronized to it. We have created some Gradle tasks that would allow you to up or download specific content quite easily. And then we have a payload here, or the IFlow here. So for this IFlow we just created, we can see we do not have any test cases for it. So let's create them. And this is also really simple. We just go into our test case here. We select the messages, and here we can see all the messages we have. We can generate the Groovy scripts needed for this and just click create. This will then push all of these changes or all of these scenarios to our Git repository, where we would then be able to actually see what is going on. So if we go back, so now does testing artifacts from, I'm not fully following you, Paween. So if we pull here, we should get the latest release here, and you should hopefully see we get a tests underneath here, luckily. And if we open here, we can see we got some test data. So we are getting the header data, all of the header data and a payload. And here we have the script. So if we select header 2 here, we put in a breakpoint. We can go here and we can just say run in debug. And this will enable us to do debugging of what is going on here. Where you would then be able to, yeah, it needs a little work to get everything working, run, compiled. And we can see now what are the stages in the debug. And all of this is without you having to do anything to make it work. Oh, we cannot stop here. We just need to rerun here or continue running. Then we will be able to see the result of this test run that so the idea is that we can see, did the script change we make give us any different results than we expected? So we can see we are now getting a blank scenario here. If we create and set a new property, run this again. We will hopefully see that there is a problem on this, that there is a new scenario with this key that is different. So without you having to write any code, you can test your Groovy scripts, and you can just make modifications to the data file if they exist. And obviously we also support Groovy script and script collections, which is obviously the place to go with this. And one of the things we will be supporting also is to run these tests also on the script collections, because that makes so much more sense for this. So that was script collections, unit tests. If we're talking about the PI to CPI migrations, is that also of interest for you? I'll see how much I want to dive into it, and the full process on this. So obviously we come from a PI world where we had a testing tool that enabled you to create test cases. And the idea is that it fetches data from your PI system, convert it to CPI test cases, and then you can see the result of what is going on here. I think we can make it. Okay. And obviously, if you want to learn more about it, go to figaf.com/PI to CPI. Here we can cover a lot more about what the tool can do, why it's different, and how it will simplify the life. But I think the main thing that is important here is that on our migration overview, you can go in and say, okay, we have some PI test cases. We can record them the same way as we did for the expressions. We just put in a message expression here. We update the channels with partner passwords. Should be good. And now we have triggered a recording that will enable us to fetch data to it. And now we just need for someone to send messages on it. I got that here in Postman in my different screen. And if we have sent some data here, we can see we got 3 inbound and 9 outbound messages. And we simply just say create a test case on this that we can then use. If we want to migrate this, we go back to our overview. We can have selected here and created a new IFlow for this. But if we just want to create the migration test cases on this, we select the IFlow that we have, or the test case we found from the PI system. We could also run it on the PI system. Then we got this migrate to CPI IFlow. It selects which object you want to move it to. And we want to open here. And if you have migrated the tool with our migration tool, it knows how to map these objects. If you have not, you can find these objects or the element ID fairly easy just by going to here and say, okay, this is this message flow ID that we want to use here. And then you say click to create. And now we have actually created a CPI test case. And if we go to the result here, we can run it on our migrated IFlow. So all of this IFlow has been created automatically by the tool. And we can obviously see it here. That it's created mapping, script collections, routings, etc. for it, multi-mappings. So if we look at our test case here, we can see it's been processed. We are getting some errors. And if we look at the diffs here, we can see it is just a time problem we can easily just ignore. And we can compare it again. So it's really easy to go through these things and say, okay, what are the problems we need to ignore? What is going on? And now we have actually fully tested our migration tool for these things. Or tested the migrated IFlow. We can see all the payloads are as we have them on the PI system without having actually to go through some of these things. And in a PI world, we do have a lot of different scenarios for doing testing, monitoring, governance, etc. We need to cover those things. Cool. I think that was all the demos I wanted to show. Are there any questions that you want to cover? Then let's have those. I hope you could see that it is pretty easy to get started with creating test cases, making sure that they run, and then you have this this process about massaging them into some useful artifacts that will be useful. Good. We have some questions here. No. Okay. And obviously, and I think this is probably where the tool also makes it a lot easier. This is about converting this into everyday usage, because normally you would need to create these test cases, and if you created them, for instance, in Postman, you would need to find a way how to leverage and run these afterwards. And as you saw, it's part of the delivery process, and this makes a lot of these things easier. So it's something that should be a normal part of the life that that you have. Each change should be each time you're doing a change should be possible to run it, and you should make sure that the test case is then updated to reflect that modification that has been performed. And this was what we saw when you could just select the test case and say, okay, now this is what I would expect next time I run it. So you always know which test cases can run and which none is not runnable. And then once you're doing transport of IFlows, you could also use these test cases. That means that if you want to transport anything, you can just say, okay, this is my test cases I have with this IFlow, and thereby seeing, all of my scenarios is actually tested. I've seen everything works out smoothly for these scenarios. if we talk about what is actually a business case with testing, and then it obviously becomes a little more challenging to figure out quite how you will convince them. Because yeah, we can all agree we should probably be testing more, but if you're not testing, it's kind of adding some extra requirements from your side. And obviously, depending on what KPIs your organization is delivering from what's going on, I think some of the key aspects is this about faster delivery of the integration, faster resolution of effort, and then fewer errors on the first deployment. So each time you run it, it's a lot easier to run these scenarios. And yeah, obviously you would save time on something like this because having a proper test process makes it easier for developers to run. Also to have and cover these different scenarios that you would not normally see in your day-to-day life. I guess you actually would also be doing this for yourself because you probably want a better way of working with your integration. And then you want to spend time on something that is more fun, which I think is more the development architecture than governance testing. And then I hope you also have the idea that you want to be able to deliver quality content for it. Another part of the business case is, what does an error cost you? How long time does it take to resolve? And if we take my example here from the beginning, it took like 5 working days, 20 hours of consulting time is calculatable. So that was to $5,000 or something like that, euros. Then you also have the part about the cost. So these were customer facing, so it kind of gave a bad reputation that we were not able to process these things correct. And then these hours I was spending on this thing together with the business experts is time away from other things that could generate more revenue for the business. So it's not just about that we saved 20 hours if we had test cases for it. It is also about all the other things around the test case or testing that makes sense for this. I hope you want to take action. We do have revamped and we do have a free trial of that you can try. And I do hope that you want to try it out. So we do have a number of different options for this to run. You can either run it on your laptop, and there's a pop-up box that goes in here that you can do it. And we have an option to run it in Cloud Foundry. And then we have an option also to run it in our trial cloud. This is really simple. We have add a lot of improvements to just make it easy for you to get started. And I think we are able to get you started in less than 10 minutes from onboarding, configuration, connecting with the CPI system, starting to create test cases and transports. And I think that is also a really important part of this this tool, that you get the option to test also the transport, because I think the transport is a crucial part of this this process. Being able to link the testing and the transport simplifies the things you have. I hope you want to go sign up and try it out. As said, you can probably get started in the cloud in 10 minutes because it is just so simple. And which created some guides that will make it easier for you to get started. You can also schedule a call with me where we can cover what are your scenarios, how will you work with this, and what is going to be interesting for you. So there's a pop-up for that. And then, yeah, let's try it out. And I'll go through the questions that you have. If you have more questions, put them into the chat or put them into the Q&A. Then it's probably easier for me to find them and cover those things. I got a question here in PO built-in migration tool coming to same manner. Yeah, so SAP is obviously delivering a migration tool to help migration. I have not seen what this tool will do. How it will handle adapters, what it will do with message mappings, etc. So it's kind of interesting to see what the roadmap is for these things. But one of the key aspects that it is not coming with at the moment, and where they're relying us on partners or expecting to rely on partners, is for the testing and being able to test the migration efforts. And this was the part you saw, that you could take a test case from your PI system and run it in a CPI IFlow, create a mapping, and ensure that these are the messages that you want to run here. Paveen, does that answer your question? And obviously you can also use the FICAF migration tool. It is also there. And but yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think SAP is targeting Q4 with it. Let's see, for some beta customers. So it'll take a little while for it to get there. And so published. Yes, Dave, we will try to send the slide deck round afterwards. And yeah, as we talked about yesterday, there's some of these things on the business case that is interesting. How do you actually position this? And if you have any ideas on this, please just write me or put some comments on what would make sense. So that was what I wanted to cover today. I hope you saw some of the benefits of having test cases, being able to run this, being able to deliver this in an easy way. And I hope you do sign up for our trial in the cloud and see how easy it is to get started. And let me just show you a little of how you get started. So you go to the DevOps part, you sign up with one of the accounts. With your email, you will get an email. Remember the correct word. What it will then come with is you have an application. You'll be guided here to the agent setting. Here you can create a new CPI agent, and all you need to do is enter the URL of the CPI agent, so just this URL. Then you'd enter your name and email address, and then it will synchronize all of this content from it, or actually 3 packages in the beginning to make it easier for you to start. Once you've done that, you can take one of these objects that you have. So we can see here we have some of these different objects, and we can then do the transport here. So we just assign it to a ticket, select the landscape, and here it's just created a demo landscape between itself. We link it to a Jira ID, whatever we have, and we simply start the transport. So now we have an IFlow. We can detach all the dependent objects, and we can then start the transport process. If we had created test cases, we could see them here also. And now I can validate the transport. I can configure artifacts. If we had set up approval, you'll be able to approve these different scenarios, etc. And you can make modifications to external configurations. So yeah, this is 10 minutes to just set up transport, and you should see that this is a lot better than what you have in CTS or file import export. Other questions? So thanks for joining. Hope it has been interesting. You got something away from it, and I do hope that you want to try it out and see how easy you can actually start creating transport, manage your integration, and create these test cases that you continuously run to make sure everything works successfully. So thanks for joining. More questions, just put them into the chat or in the private chat or in the Q&A section, and we can cover those things. And now the import is done. Glad you liked it. Good. Cool. So good. Sujoy, glad you liked it. Yes, hope we get to talk more on these things and you try it out. Glad you liked it, Carsten. And yeah, we'll try to send the replay if you want to share it with some of your teammates. The slide deck that we have from here, probably it will go out tomorrow or something like that. Perfect. Good. I will stop the recording then.